dia a tothom. Gràcies a la Fundació Nexe per la invitació. És un privilegi ser aquí. Disculpe, home, ara continuaré en anglès. Potser la propera vegada, tot en València o espanyol. Okay. The United Kingdom used to be regarded as one of the most stable countries in Europe constitutionally. Something went wrong in the last 2 decades, and particularly the last few years, where we have entered a period of instability and constitutional upheaval, and the paths ahead are very unclear as we look to the next few years. Mostly the process of constitutional reform has been dominated by incremental changes, pragmatic adjustments in response to demand when necessary. There has been no grand plan at all. And so the changes are designed to suit different problems as and when they arise. Excuse me. So there's no coherence to constitutional reform in the United Kingdom, and it's been mostly focused until now on the periphery, on the national minorities, on the territories at the edges of the United Kingdom, leaving the biggest part, England, without a significant constitutional reform. All of that process of muddling through, which has been the dominant feature of constitutional reform in the UK, all of that is now challenged significantly by the upheaval created by Brexit. Okay. So, in terms of the formal process of constitutional reform, the way that the Constitution is designed leaves the power, the authority for all constitutional reform in the hands of the Westminster Parliament. So any time there is constitutional reform, it requires legislative change at the Westminster Parliament. The Scottish Parliament, when it was set up, its founding document is an act of law, an ordinary act of law, I guess, in the Westminster Parliament. Same with Wales and same with the Northern Ireland Assembly. All of these things had to go through the ordinary process of legislation in both houses of Parliament, and any change to those, any change to the primary lawmaking powers, again, is endorsed, is debated, is worked through the process of legislation at the Westminster Parliament. Because Parliament, it remains sovereign. And that's perhaps, there aren't too many obvious principles, underpinning principles of the UK Constitution, but the doctrine of parliamentary sovereignty is absolutely fundamental. But Westminster is not Santa Claus. So each of these changes has had to be thought through and has come as a response to the emergence of nationalism, primarily, within Scotland, particularly, to some extent within Wales. So here we have some images of electoral successes for the Scottish National Party, particularly when these emerged in the areas that we would think of as the heartlands of the Labour Party, that used to be the heartlands of the Labour Party, the industrial areas of central Scotland. And here you can see on this chart here that from the late 1960s onwards, the SNP and Plaid Cymru started to make electoral inroads in UK general elections. Not in any significant way, because they're so small in that they're very unlikely to ever hold the balance of power in the context of Westminster, as you have seen in the Spanish context. But within Scotland and within Wales, when they threatened electorally the dominance of the Labour Party in both cases, that party was prompted into a response to try to accommodate nationalism, and usually that response has eventually taken the form of a commitment to a limited form of self-government, and to home rule or devolution in the UK context, to try to contain support for more radical change in the form of independence. Northern Ireland, obviously, is somewhat different in that devolution in Northern Ireland was introduced in response to the competing nationalisms and sectarian conflict within the territory, the disputed territory of Northern Ireland. So it was a process not so much of a response to minority nationalism, but as a tool of conflict resolution. Here also, we see the same process evident when devolution is strengthened once it has been up and running for a few years. So the parliaments were only set up in 1999, but already there has been a series of fundamental changes to the legislation with new acts of parliament in Westminster in response to recurring nationalist demand. The latest one was 2 or 3 days before the vote on Scottish independence, because they got a fright. And they thought there was an opinion poll which suggested that the result was 50-50, and that prompted a very rapid response by the 3 UK parties in what has now become known as the vow, to introduce a more radical form of devolution with a permanent parliament with extensive new powers and faster, safer, better change than separation. So this was being bounced into a response in order to try to contain support for independence. In the process of constitutional reform in the United Kingdom, there has been a variable use of different types of commissions to debate and to deliberate and come forward with proposals. Sometimes these have been commissions that have been set up by the UK government to review the powers of the existing parliaments and consider whether they should be strengthened. The most significant of these was the Silk Commission set up in Wales to review Welsh devolution. And it produced really thorough, really extensive reports which have led to further legislative change to significantly enhance devolution in Wales. So that is, if there is to be any model here, I think the Silk Commission offers one. Sometimes commissions are appointed by the devolved governments themselves. The Richard Commission, another one set up in Wales, it was the result of a coalition agreement between the Labour Party and Plaid Cymru, the Welsh Nationalist Party, and it too led to the first reform of devolution in Wales. Sometimes commissions are expert commissions, so perhaps a selection of notable people with something to contribute, and they're independent of the party, of the process of party competition, sometimes within a strict remit set by the parties or the government, but they operate at arm's length from them and have more respect as a result of that. But sometimes the word commission is used very loosely to refer to what is essentially an inter-party bargaining process. And that was the process that led to the latest reform of devolution within Scotland by a body called the Smith Commission. It was also the process that led to the setting up of the Northern Ireland Assembly, which was the result of the multi-party talks, which led to the Good Friday Agreement. But that was also somewhat different in that it was a mediation process and an international agreement with an important role by the United States and indeed the EU. From the perspective of national minorities, the most important strategy has been the referendum. And referendums as a form of constitutional reform are difficult to initiate without the consent of the Westminster government, because under the Constitution, constitutional reform is a matter reserved to the Westminster Parliament. So prior to, as I think is familiar to you now, prior to the Scottish independence referendum, there was a negotiation between the UK government and the Scottish government that led towards a temporary transfer of power and authority from Westminster to the Scottish Parliament in order to facilitate the holding of an independence referendum. I know that that process is looked upon with some envy from Catalonia and elsewhere. We don't know if that was a one-off process because we haven't tried to go there again. It was temporary, but perhaps it set a precedent. And there was a recognition that after the Scottish National Party won a majority in the Parliament in the election and had this as their manifesto commitment, that they had the legitimacy to put the question to the people in a vote. From the perspective of the national minorities, and indeed from the UK government, sometimes a referendum is used in order to legitimize decisions taken at the elite level. So in Northern Ireland, and indeed in the Irish Republic, the Good Friday Agreement was very much an elite-driven process, necessarily so in some respects, but it was put to the population in the North and in the Republic to give it legitimacy before the changes were introduced. In Wales, the referendum has been used as a tool to legitimise the devolution process, which never had the same strength within the wider population and within civil society as was the case in Scotland. And there were always concerns about the participation in the referendum process, particularly in 2011, in the last one, where you can see here turnout is very low. That's a lot to do with the fact that there was no effective campaign against the proposals, not through any active boycott, but simply because there was just nobody to argue against it. And so that made political mobilization difficult in that case. But devolution is much more firmly embedded within Wales now than was the case in 1997, where the majority, as you can see here, for the assembly to be set up was wafer thin, wafer thin. In Scotland, the referendum, particularly the independence referendum, was used as a tool for political mobilization. So when the SNP won their election majority, it was not because there was a groundswell of support for independence. There was not. In fact, support for independence at that time was lower than it had been in previous years. So the SNP used the opportunity of office and took a gamble. They gambled on the referendum. I think they gambled on the referendum being a win-win for them, whatever the result, provided they could secure enough support to demonstrate that there was a groundswell of opinion in favour of independence. And what we have seen is that the process of holding the referendum, which was a long campaign, led to the creation of a nationalist movement far beyond the SNP. So you see here in the map is all of the organizations that were set up in the context of the referendum campaign from the grassroots that were beyond the membership of the SNP, sometimes associated with the other pro-independence party, which is the Scottish Green Party, but sometimes associated with no party at all. And so the referendum created a nationalist movement that hadn't previously been there. Not all of these organizations have survived the campaign, but this photograph here is from a pro-independence demonstration last Saturday, where something in the region of 50, 60,000 people, their estimates range from 35,000 to 100,000, so I'll stick in the middle. People marched through the streets of Glasgow in favor of independence. Now, there's no campaign. There was no reason to do this now. It was simply a demonstration of the support from a movement that is still there, nearly 4 years on from the referendum. Okay, we know the result of the referendum, that it was a comfortable victory in the end for the no campaign, but not that comfortable. So it was clear, but close enough to ensure that the issue remained important. And the legacy from the referendum was that the losers won. So the SNP emerged victorious in defeat. So they lost the referendum vote, but they won the peace, if you like. And you could see in the 6 months following the referendum, a massive increase in the party's membership, first of all, and then in a process which I think mirrors in some ways the situation of the Catalan socialists. You saw the Scottish Labour Party, which had been the dominant party within Scotland, really struggle to cope with the constitutional question and the constitutional issue. And they were virtually wiped out in the election that followed. What we have also seen, so this is a map which exaggerates the strength of SNP support in the 2015 election because of the first-past-the-post system. The map from the most recent election would not look like this, but nonetheless, it's a dramatic image of the territorial cleavage that dominates electoral politics within the United Kingdom. The constitutional debate continues to dominate politics within Scotland. It is the lens through which most other issues are now debated, which is a challenge for those who have public policy concerns, because the Constitution is everything. It's led to a political polarization within Scotland, and that's resonated within civil society to some extent too, and a resurgence of the Scottish Conservative Party as the party that is undisputably the unionist party, the pro-UK party. But we see that support for Scottish independence has not diminished. Indeed, during the course of the referendum campaign and beyond, it increased to probably about where it was at the time of the referendum, so just under half. Now, there's no stability, of course, because of the big rupture, which is the constitutional upheaval created by the Brexit referendum, which is, I suppose, the United Kingdom's own expression of nationalism. Well, I'm about to qualify that statement. So here we have, again, a quite dramatic picture of the referendum vote, which again slightly exaggerates the degree of difference because it's based on counting areas. But what it illustrates, and forgive me, the picture is confusing because here on the map, the blue is Remain, and on the table, the blue is Leave. So sorry. So here we can see that Scotland and Northern Ireland were pro-Remain in the EU, and Wales looked a lot like England, actually, in being pro-Leave. London also clearly and undisputably pro-Remain. But within Scotland, it was, by some margin, the most pro-European territory of the United Kingdom. And in every demographic, this is the case. So generally, with Brexit, there is a social demography to the vote, where those who are better educated, more middle class, and younger tended to be pro-EU and pro-Remain, whereas those who were older and working class tended to be pro-Leave. And you see that in Scotland also, but nowhere near to the same extent. There were Remain majorities everywhere, and I am running out of time, so I just want to say very briefly, what we see with Brexit is, I think, a process of competing nationalisms, competing projects of self-determination. The United Kingdom's is like an expression of British nationalism, but really English nationalism vis-a-vis the European Union, and it runs it competes against the dominant narrative of nationalism within Scotland. And then there is, of course, the problem of Ireland, which I do not have time to talk about, but we can come back to if you want in questions, because it is the fundamental challenge facing the entire Brexit process. And that I will leave it there. Thank you.
Moltes gràcies. Voldria tindre la seva opinió respecte de les possibilitats de que Escòcia esdevingui un estat independent per els resultats que el Brexit produirà en els pròxims anys, parlant de 5-6 anys. Gràcies.
It's very difficult to foresee. Some people there is a constituency within nationalism in Scotland that was also in favour of Leave, but mostly the nationalism is associated with a pro-European position. But Brexit, and in particular the UK's decision to leave the internal market and the customs union, means that the border between Scotland and the rest of the United Kingdom, particularly England, would become an issue in any future independence debate in a way that it simply was not before. So some of the issues that are troubling the border on the island of Ireland would be part of a debate on Scottish independence, and that would be deeply problematic for the cause, the argument for independence in any future referendum. So it's very, very, it makes it much more complicated, for sure.
Hello, so I was just wondering what comes next for the SNP, because they didn't perform that well in the last general election, so I was wondering what's the next strategy.
Okay. So I'm really glad you asked that, because it's a misunderstanding, I think. So because the SNP performed so dramatically well in 2015 it made their performance in 2017 look like it wasn't very impressive. But in fact, it was by some distance their second best ever performance in a UK general election. And they remain undisputably the dominant party of Scottish politics in every election. They have the advantage of, so the prevalence of the constitutional issue being the dominant cleavage within Scotland gives the SNP an advantage because the pro-union side is split between the Conservatives and the Labour Party in the main, so between the right and the left. And so they occupy a ground more or less that they own. There is the Green Party, but they are small. And so they don't really have a lot of competition so long as that issue is the dominant one. How long it will dominate, I do not know. The fact that it's the dominant issue serves the Conservative Party well, because it's really the only issue that they have that defines them and is positive for them. But it's very unlikely to see them being contenders for government in Scotland in the future. And the idea of a coalition between the Conservatives and the Labour Party is quite difficult to foresee. So the SNP has been in power now in Scotland since 2007. There's not an election for a few years. I can't predict what's going to happen next week, so I'm not going to try to predict what will happen in 2021.
Maybe the last one.
You stressed a lot the importance of parliamentary sovereignty as a kind of a reference point for constitutional change. But now, having seen this kind of evolution of change through referenda, and especially after the Brexit vote, the tolerance or acceptability to point out that Parliament might actually have a different opinion from the people is actually very low. So I was wondering whether actually parliamentary sovereignty is still that important in practice, given what we have seen over the last year, or whether in a way this kind of use of referenda weakens that principle a lot. As I said, acceptability of pointing out that parliamentarians might be allowed to have different opinions from people seems to be declined a lot. So.
Sure. I think there's a myth of parliamentary sovereignty which remains quite important. It's part of the identity of British politics, and it's important symbolically in that sense. I think it's still important in practice with respect to the territorial constitution, in that there is still the authority for a UK government or a UK parliament to for example, say no to the next suggestion of a referendum in the future from any one of the territories. So that issue of consent is still quite important. But the convention that they won't act without the consent of the devolved territories is also very important, as you know. All of that is being challenged now by the process of Brexit, the domestic process of Brexit. But you're right in that there's an intriguing thing around the Brexit referendum, in that, like any referendum in the UK, it was non-binding constitutionally, but has been seen as politically binding on the elected members. So you're right to point out that there is a balance between what is constitutionally the position and what by convention or political reality also matters. Yes, of course.
So good morning. I'm also apologize because I cannot speak Valencian or Spanish or Catalan. I try to do something in English, but also I'm not completely sure. now we move on another case, on another established democracy in Europe, in Western Europe. It is Switzerland. Switzerland is not simply an established democracy, but is also one of the most stable democracy in Western Europe and probably worldwide. And in this country, we can also wonder about the concern about territorial minority in regards of constitutional order. And sometimes also in this country, where minority are usually considered in a very respectful way, with a peaceful, in a very peaceful situation. Also in this country, we observe sometimes some grievance, some claiming for autonomy, for more right for minorities. So this is the case that I can try to show you very briefly today, considering some questions, because when we discuss about the organization of this workshop, we try to fix some points to be shorter, to be clear. So the first question is about which channels, institutional channels, can use collective actors from minority areas aiming to change Swiss constitutional order and policy making. The second is how these channels has been used in the last decades, really, actually. And third is which are who are the most successful actors or more influent actors from minority areas who are able to use these channels, and how they perform at different ways. So that's, of course, I underline again, traditionally Switzerland is seen as a country with strong cultural cleavages, religious, linguistic cleavage. At the same time, a country which is able to develop a very peaceful relations among majorities and minorities. The common reason is federalism, consensus style, party organization rooted across regions. So the national-wide parties are rooted in all main regions, also French-speaking, German-speaking, Italian-speaking areas. Of course, direct democracy, a very important tradition in Switzerland. All this component is favorite, usually autonomy, participation, voice for minorities, and of course, they should undermine center-periphery tensions. This is the common vision of Switzerland. At the same time, Switzerland is a country which provides a very strong possibility to change constitution, very open to change constitution. Not only parliament in this sense, but the real change in Switzerland in terms of constitutional law pass through direct democracy. So citizens decided on every change in constitutional order at the cantonal level, region, cantonal level, and national level. So the main tool, the main institutional tool is the Federal Popular Constitutional Initiative, and any informal also committee, party association can partially change Swiss constitution at any time. Partially, of course, partially. But the question is, of course, to put a new issue, also a new issue. They can change constitution, they change the present constitution, they introduce new aspect of the constitution, but this is the possibility offered by Swiss political system. And at national level, simply 100,000 signature constrain parliament to organize a referendum among Swiss citizens, and of course a simple majority, and of course also the majority of citizens, but also the cantons, are necessary to achieve this change. And this is also a very important point. Popular initiatives are not simply a possibility allowed to the citizen, but also are very recognized, legitimized by political elites that, of course, they use also this means in order to introduce changes, to negotiate within the system their own position, their own orientation. At the same time, there are many other possibilities, especially for policy change, for not simply in this sense, we can move on from the constitutional law to the usual normal laws, and the policy change is the possibility to change for minority actors, for actors coming from minority areas, to change at different level, with different tools, national policy making. So there is a facultative popular referendum, there are cantonal referendum, there are several other possibilities allowed to actors, political actors, but also informal actors, associations, in order to influence the federal, national decision making. This is in terms of from a juridical, political, institutional point of view, of course, and the questions are if these tools are used effectively by regional forces and especially regionalist claimed forces, and which is also a very important point I just underlined before. In Switzerland, there are no, in particular in the German part, the French part, almost no parties regional rooted, which exist only in a canton and only in another. In Switzerland, nationwide parties are articulated in the whole country. So that's the same party, these Libre parties. The Christian Democrats are rooted in the German, the French, Italian part, and it is the tradition. So the regional-based parties are exceptions in Swiss political legacy, apart from some examples in the history, and which is interesting today is we observe the last 20 years some examples of regional parties with regionalist claiming coming from territorial minorities. And this is very important to know that now in this period some changes are erased. And why? We can talk about a long time on that. We can talk about the possibility yes, the question of the territorial inequalities in Switzerland, which are increased now. Of course, the country is one of the most successful country in the globalization today, able to take advantage from globalization, especially in the urban center areas, in the German part, in the French part. But at the same time, we observe an increasing territorial inequalities. And secondly, in spite of strong federalism, an increasing centralization of powers are at stake at the moment, and they lowering the autonomy of cantons. This is another important point that scholars have been able to observe in the last decades. And third, the traditional statewide, national-wide center-right parties were dominant in the federal government for a century in Switzerland, are now in decline. And anti-establishment parties, populist parties, nationalist parties are growing in the Swiss political system. So that there are some changes, some new changing in the Swiss political system, and it permit maybe to explain, at least partially, the emergence of some regionalist parties, especially in the French part, Canton of Geneva, and Canton of Ticino in the Italian part of Switzerland. And now I try to focus on this, the most successful of this party, the Lega dei Ticinesi, the League, currently dominant party within the Italian-speaking Swiss canton. As you know, in Switzerland it's 26 cantons. One of these is a canton where the official language is only Italian, it's Ticino. It's in the southern part of the country. And in this canton, the Lega, the League, was founded in 1991 as a regionalist and populist party. And since 1995, this party is member of the cantonal government, and since 2011 has been the most important party in the government. Its strategy is to enhance cantonal autonomy, to ask for more money, and border protection against EU integration, free circulation of persons in particular. And the party is, the aim, the implicit aim is not open in the new use this label, but of course they fight for an asymmetric federalism, with aiming for a special rights for Ticino, because at the moment Switzerland is also called a symmetric federalism, so all Swiss cantons enjoy the same right, and in understanding the strong differences in terms of size, economy or language. So that the Lega is try to fight in this way. How it does that with several alliances. It's not alone. This party is not alone. He has able to work and to create alliances with nationwide right-wing parties, especially with referendum, using a referendum against European Union, against the European integration of Switzerland, and with center-right cantonal party at cantonal level. So that is an alliance, a multi-level and open alliances strategy, using, as I said, referendum, but also federal constitutional initiative, popular initiative, as I said before, but also cantonal, at the cantonal level, not only at federal level, promoting or supporting in different cases, and which is also very important, that some of this mobilization create tension between cantonal laws and national laws. Constitution, because in Switzerland we have a constitution also at the cantonal level, the tension between cantonal constitution and federal constitution. There are tension, and it creates, of course, tension, but of course in Switzerland the superiority of the federal national level is taken for granted, but in terms of mobilization, communication, and so on, it permits to influence the political agenda, first of all. And this is one of the most important achievements of this party, is to strongly influence the political agenda, the cantonal level, but also at the national level, push the question of the center-periphery issue, the immigration, the cross-border workers, this issue, in relation to the position of the canton to be considered discriminated by nationwide decision-making in respect of the European Union and so on. And of course, this could influence also the national agenda. One of the results was to influence the election of the member of one of the members of Swiss government from Ticino in 2011, elected in 2011, not from the Lega but from the Liberals. But it also was one of the key output of this mobilization. And of course, this party has achieved also some federal constitutional popular initiative, not simply to mobilize through, but also to achieve. And to have a result in terms of, especially on the level of foreign policy related to EU. The first referendum against the Swiss EU integration at the beginning of the 90s was launched by the Lega the Ticinesi and the other parties in Switzerland. So that was the first Eurosceptic party before the Swiss People Party, which has become the most important party at a national level in Switzerland the last 20 years. So that's they create there's a capacity to mobilize, and of course at the cantonal level also was able to not only to influence decision making in the parliament, but also through cantonal constitutional popular initiatives in alliance with populist parties. And of course trying to influence, and he was able to influence labor market rules, immigration, some specific laws connected with the autonomy of the canton, especially on security policy. And what is interesting also to observe now is this capacity to maintain populist claim against the establishment, against Europe, against government and national government. At the same time, to be member for a long time for a government coalition at the cantonal level, also with socialists, with center-right parties. The consequences of this game inside, outside, is also at the same time to radicalizing and to mainstreaming regional grievance within Ticino, in this sense, at the same time to push in the agenda center-right, center-periphery issues, so to create an habit to discuss on that, to mainstream that, at the same time to radicalize when the moment, the opportunity are open at the moment when is a new referendum in Europe are at stake. So I try to conclude very briefly my presentation. So first of all, of course, the point is the widespread opinion about the Swiss political system as historically seen as a model of peaceful balance between majority and territorial minorities. Actors from territorial minorities can use many institutional channels, open to use many institutional channels for claiming toward national powers in order to change constitution gradually, very gradually, of course, but they can change constitution and policy making. And direct democracy especially can help. It is a very strong tool in this sense to gradually change a situation and to try to create a space of negotiation between the power, the cantonal power, the regional power, and the national ones. And of course, this situation could be undermine any tension, but it's not the case at the moment. Some regionalist parties claiming for a stronger federalism raised in the last decades, in particular in Swiss-Italian part, in the Canton Ticino, but also in Geneva. It's also a border region in the French part of Switzerland. And of course, the result is at the same time the possibility of using flexibility and permeability of the system. The system is Switzerland is also a political system where the opposition can participate to the government, and the majority in terms of politics, in terms of party politics, can are co-opted usually the minorities inside the government, and of course the idea is we neutralize them, but it's not always the case, especially in this mediatic world, media influenced and media shaped world. And of course, the result at the moment is that these parties are able to change some aspect of the constitution and influence not only policy making but political agenda. So that's my presentation. I'm very kind to be here and very open for your questions. Thank you.
Soc Ismael Vallès i m'interessaria que posares claritat entre la possibilitat de connexió entre la Lega Ticina i la Lega Nord italiana, tot i que hi ha una especial confrontació en el límit entre Suïssa i l'Itàlia del Nord.
Yes, this is a very tricky question because the two Legas are very close in terms of strategies, in terms of ideology, regionalist parties, populist parties. They also have some connection among them. They meet each other several times, the leaders, and also they participate to some meetings together. But the question, of course, the main question is they are two different constituencies. The Lega Nord defend the cross-border Italian cross-border workers. They work in Switzerland, in the region where the Lega di Ticinesi is mobilized. And in this region, the cross-border the Italian cross-border workers are considered as bad competitors in the labor market. So they create tension within the labor market. So they have two different constitutions. Normally, they should fight each other. Not at all. Not at all. They create what I say a sort of competitive cooperation. So they, to some extent, they say, okay, on this point we share the common view, and we emphasize that. And the other side, we know we have some contradiction, so we can avoid that. So they try to have a double strategy. We compete, but we don't compete openly, because in any case we are not on the same constituency. So they create some diplomatic relation on the one side, and the other side they maximize the connection, the possibility to create some cooperation. So it's very clever, but it's usually, as you imagine, in any governmental alliance, it's the same. So we try to, if we want to stay together, we have to maximize the commonality and to say, okay, we have some divergence, the diversity, but we don't push our attention on that. If not, it's split, it's finished. So is this the same point, this competition? They create this equilibrium, I don't know, and it works. Because, why? Because they stay in two different countries.
Yes, but are both against the European Union?
Yes, of course, this is a commonalities. So they say, oh, we stay together because we are against Europe. So we are friends, no problem. That's it.
Thank you. What are the strategies and differences between Union of Centre, Christian Democratic Party and Liberal Party relative to Lega in Switzerland?
Yes, these parties are in a declining trend, and they have had a lot of problems to react to this radical regionalist populist parties. As in other contexts, these mainstream parties are very tired. So it's simply very, very. They have difficulty to mobilize at the grassroots level. They have we have their financial problem, these parties. They have problem to reconvert, to change their own agenda, to adapt the agenda. So they simply, in several situations, they simply follow the new regionalist, very strong party. So they imitate on the one side, they try to demarcate, but it's very difficult. So it's a bargaining, but it's between a whole tired people, in this sense, and the young, very, very tough people. And this create a sort of alliance. At the same time, they create a sort of permanent conflict. But in general, mainstream party from Liberal Party and the Christian Democrat have been a very difficult position in front of the Lega dei Ticinesi. because the Lega Ticinese was able, has a very, very strong capacity to communicate, a big capacity of communicate, new forms of communication, new style of communication, very polemic, and this was very difficult for the mainstream party because it's very established, very also for politicians to be in a polemic conflict, to be also to insult, to have a really a personal attack. Not habit is not Swiss habit.
And with the Swiss People's Party?
Swiss People's Party is very close to the Lega, very, very close to the Lega. They have a very, very good connection, in also a sort of cooperative competition, but with a lot of alliances, of course, on European Union. This is the main point. Anti-immigration issues, of course, border issues, all this stuff create a sort of alliances between Swiss People's Party and the Lega.
And is the independence of Ticino the final aim of the Lega?
Not at all. So if you distinguish between different regionalist claim, we have separatists on the one side, extreme, and the other part, you have an integrative federalism or sort of thing. Michael Keating, so, sometimes he wrote on that. So this is a case of a demand of a stronger federalism within the state, within the unitary state. So the unitary state, of course, because in Switzerland, unitary state is always a federal state. So they fight for more recognizing autonomy of the canton within the federal state and not to separate from it.
Thank you.
Bon dia. Penses que influeix el fet que parlen que l'estat-nació italià pugui influir en el fet de la Lliga? És a dir, entens la pregunta? Okay.
I understand a bit Catalan because it's very close to my dialect, so that's only the reason. Yes, this is a crucial point. The Italian economic crisis is a very crucial aspect of this mobilization of this regional party. So the Lega dei Ticinesi is first of all an anti-Italian party. So it's regionalist against the central power in Switzerland, and at the same time they mobilize the anti-Italian feeling. They create, because anti-Italian today is not against language, it's not against culture, it's against the state of Rome, the bureaucracy of Rome, and also the state which is not able to create well-being for the people. And this is this economic crisis which push people from Italian to Switzerland in order to find jobs. This is also the fear that La Liga, they use La Liga for mobilizing inside Switzerland. So Italy is a bankrupt country. So we have to protect ourselves and to have a border between Switzerland and Italy. So the Italian issue is very, very crucial in this mobilization.
I'm going to stand anyways, I think. So. You need to... Sure. Okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks a lot for the invitation. I'm extremely pleased to be here today. And I'm here to discuss the Belgian case, which is a classic case of shift from unitary state to a federal state, a deeply federal state, but also a classic case of political blockade around that process of institutional reform. After all, we have the pleasure to have the world record in terms of a country with no national government. So, but that's a recent world record, but we also have a tradition of very long government formation in Belgium. So my presentation today will be around two elements. First, some contextual elements to tell you a little bit where we started from and where we are now, because I think that's important to just set the context right. And then the second part will be about how did we get there. So in terms of context, well, Belgium is characterized by the multilingual society. It was also a Catholic society, although it has shifted towards a more atheist lay society. It was also a very simple country institutionally originally. So it was a parliamentary monarchy led by a French-speaking elite. And it shifted from that unitary state to a federation in 1993. Oy, this doesn't show at all. It was a tale about political actors. I don't know. I hope it's not I don't think it's going to be the case for the rest of my presentation. It's just this slide. It's a slide about political actors, but I'm just going to tell you the story about the political actors. So you have two separate columns for parties in the French-speaking side and parties in the Dutch-speaking side. And the story here is the story of the progressive fragmentation of the party system in Belgium. Again, the story started very simply with initially, at the independence of the country, a first party emerging, the Liberal Party defending the interest of the newly independent state versus the church. That was in the 1840s. After that, the Catholics emerged to fight against that and defend the interest of the church. So that's the two first parties that characterized the party system in Belgium. At the end of the 19th century, a third player entered the political landscape, the Social Democrats. But it became really more complicated with the emergence of the regionalist parties after World War II. And there you have various parties, regionalist parties, that emerged. It led to the split of the three former parties. So the Liberals, the Catholics, and the Social Democrats split along the two languages, dominant languages in Belgium, which went from 3 parties to 6 parties, plus the regionalist parties. So that led to a deep fragmentation of the party system after World War II. After that, we saw new parties emerge, the Green parties, but in every case, then new parties emerged, each in their own linguistic community. So 2 Green parties emerged, 2 radical right parties emerged, well, there's 1 radical left party, but one can argue that they are de facto kind of separate. But so that means that today, you can't count from here, but there's 14 relevant parties represented at the national parliament. It's a deeply fragmented party system, and we can even argue that it's 2 separate party systems. And if you look at the composition of the House of Representatives in 2014, you see that colorful palette of parties that illustrate that fragmentation of the party system. Highly fragmented based on that linguistic divide. So you have 2 sets of party systems, a Dutch-speaking, a French-speaking, but you can see that there's in each and every party family, there's a sister party. So there's everything in double. So that's for the political actors. A lot of political actors today in Belgium. It's pretty much the same story in terms of institutional context. Started very simple, became very complex. So at the independence of the country, very simple tale, borrowed from the French, centralization, provinces, municipalities, clear and simple. But with the demands for more recognition of the linguistic diversity in Belgium, the first element that was introduced was what we call the linguistic border. It's not really a physical border, but you see that it represents the various languages and territories in Belgium. In the north, it's the Dutch-speaking area. In the south, the French-speaking area. In the east, the German-speaking area. And Brussels is bilingual French and Dutch. And so that's the first recognition of the multilingual character of Belgium. Then we moved towards the process of federalization of the state. But the problem is that there was two visions of how to proceed with the federalization of the state. On the Flemish side, the demands were for more recognitions of the culture and language. So it was based on language. And it led to the creation of 3 communities based on language. In the north, the Flemish community, but also including Brussels, that's bilingual. In the south, the French community, also including Brussels, because bilingual. And then in the east, the German community. So that's the first vision, that one. But Belgium being a country of compromise, the second vision won as well. And so there's also regions. And that was the French-speaking demand for a recognition of more economic autonomy for the various territorial regions in Belgium. It was mainly based on demands from the southern part of the country that was facing deindustrialization. And so there you have 3 regions: Flanders, Brussels, and the Walloon region that also encompasses the German-speaking community, to make things simple. So you have 3 regions, 3 communities. And so that's the complexity of the system, because each of them do have their own institutions, parliament and government. So that makes it really a complicated system in terms of layers and then a bargain between the various layers. So that being said, how did we get there? How did we get to this very complex system? Well, it was not easy, because in contrast to the Scottish case or the Swiss case, Belgium does not have direct democracy or referendum as a mean for reform. The main tool is constitutional reforms. And again, Belgium being a country of consensus democracy, the way to achieve that is difficult, because there's a lot of veto granted to minorities, and so it's not an easy path. And here you have the summary of how to challenge the constitutional order in Belgium, and it's not easy. So if you want to change the constitution and introduce more state reform, it has to go through Parliament. The federal Parliament has to declare a set number of articles from the Constitution that will be open for revision, and that has to be approved by the 2 chambers, the House and the Senate. And nowadays the Senate is a chamber to represent the communities, the federal entities. After that, after the decision has been made in terms of which articles to be revised, the federal parliament is dissolved, new elections are called, and the new majority will negotiate based only on those articles that were open for revision. In order for them to manage to implement a revision, they need a 2/3 majority. and informally they also need a majority in each linguistic group composing the federal parliament. And the constitution cannot be changed in times of war or in times of regency because we're a monarchy. So that's tough because you need a large majority to be able to change the constitution. But you're going to say, well, today you're already a federal state. You can also bargain and negotiate how to adjust the way that federal state functions. And so there's also procedures to change the main policy-making processes within the federation. And there, too, there's very strict rules in terms of how to proceed. It's always going through the central level, and it's going through special laws. And those special laws, again, necessitate a two-thirds majority and a majority in each linguistic group. So it's, again, based on a large consensus among political actors. And those special laws, they allow the political actors to change the composition and also the functioning of the sub-state level bodies, so the communities and the regions. Although that's, since the last reform of the state, now transitioning towards communities and regions being able to do that themselves more and more. The special laws can also be used to change the distribution of competencies between the levels, so between the federal level and the sub-state level. It's also the way to change or to make any changes to the linguistic border, so the territorial integrity of or sub-state levels. So all these changes have to go through special laws, and also, if you want to change special laws, it has to be adopted through a special law. So all that makes it very difficult to make constitutional or institutional reforms. But also more generally, again, as a feature of consensus democracy, all other laws are submitted to what we call the alarm bell procedure. It's a procedure that grants the linguistic groups a veto on any law that's introduced that may be put their minority status at risk. So there's really a lot of checks and balances or institutional settings that protect the minorities. So it's very difficult to change the institutional setting, and yet we've gone through that process of federalization. So how did we proceed? Well, through the role of some political actors, those that we call regionalist parties, although you could call any party in Belgium a regionalist party because there's no national statewide parties anymore, so they're all regional in a certain sense. But in the 1950s and 60s, three regionalist parties emerged. And they were all defending federalist views. And it was one party for each region of the country. So the first one, and it's the most known one, was the Volksunie, so the VU, defending federalist views in Flanders. The second one, FDF, was active in Brussels, and the third one in the Walloon region, the RW. So they all pushed strongly for state reforms. And we'll see that they've been electorally very successful until the end of the 1980s. 1990s and 2000s, these regionalist parties faced a decline. There's no more regionalist party in the southern part of the country. The RW has disappeared in '85. Although some of its members went to other French-speaking parties. In Brussels, the FDF faced electoral decline and therefore went into an alliance with the Liberal party, the French-speaking Liberals, in 1993. And finally, even in Flanders, the Volksunie, the VU, faced electoral difficulties, and ultimately, in 2001, went through what we can call a divorce, because it split into two separate wings based on their left-right positioning. One wing was more right-wing, the other one was more left-wing. In fact, they both allied with a bigger party in Flanders, one with the center-right and one with the center-left party. So that was for the 2000s. So they appear to be in decline, but then they revive themselves in the late 2000, early 2010. And today we again have active regionalist parties in Flanders and Brussels. In Flanders, it's the right-wing former part of the Volksunie, yep. And in Brussels, it's the Défi, who got again its independence from the Liberals. Very quickly, in terms of strategies, how did they push? These actors pushed their agenda, but first through electoral success. If you look here, it's the Flemish Volksunie, rapid electoral success in the 60s and in the 70s, same pattern in Brussels, same pattern in Wallonia. So through electoral growth, these actors were able to put a lot of pressure on other traditional actors in the Belgian political landscape. But beyond that, they also used what we call a tribune strategy. So a lot of activity outside of the traditional political institutions. A lot of initiatives in terms of media presence in demonstrations, a lot of link with associations, especially on the Flemish side. The link with the Flemish movement is very strong, and that has helped the Volksunie to renew itself into the NVA today. But in Brussels too, the former regionalist party can rely on a strong local anchorage to be able to survive over the years. So a tribune strategy is a very successful strategy for those parties. They've also been very active in parliament, introducing a lot of initiatives, debate and controlling government. What they haven't done very successfully is a participation into government. So they managed to influence the process of federalization in Belgium, mainly from outside government. So their attempts to enter a national government have been either unsuccessful, electorally very costly. What they've done is mainly govern through or via the regional governments. And in doing so, they put a lot of pressure on the national level, because all other parties tend to enter governments both at the regional and the national level. So they can't really put pressure on the other level, whereas if you're a regionalist party only present at the regional level, it's much easier to then criticize the national level. Your other partners in the coalition, they can't do that. So that has been a very helpful, successful strategy. And so in terms of strategies, what is really striking is that all reforms of the state in Belgium has been carried out at the national level without the regionalist parties. And so that's maybe something interesting to dig into. And it's been the same with the renewal now with the NVA and Défi at the national level. NVA today is present at the national level. It's the biggest party in Belgium. They're sitting in the national government, and that's very exceptional, but they've done that by agreeing not to discuss any state reform. They tried to enter the previous government to negotiate a state reform. That negotiation failed. So it's really a pattern of regionalist parties being able to enter the national level when it's not about institutions and institutional reform. Now, just to conclude on some elements and paradoxical elements of the Belgian situation in terms of what went right and what went wrong in the Belgian case. Well, some things went very right for those regionalist parties. First, they managed to put an end to a voice for the center. There's no more parties that speak for the center. All parties are regional. All traditional party families have split. Some people say there's two-party system, two democracies in Belgium. But there's some backfiring in that, in the sense that it becomes, or it makes it more difficult now to form a coalition at the federal level, because you need the parity between the two communities, and same at the Brussels level, also very complicated. It's also putting some distance with citizens. It's a complex system for citizens to apprehend, to also be able to put some accountability on political actors. It's a very hard system to understand for new citizens coming to Belgium, and it's the case in Brussels, where you have 30% of non-Belgians. It's very tough for them to make a sense of that, and so that's the municipalities where there's the lowest rate of EU citizens registering to vote. I think partly because it's impossible to understand why you have two sets of options for each set of ideology. There's also, they won because there's a deep federalization of the Belgian state, but it's never their vision who won because they didn't negotiate those state reforms. So the current situation is a compromise between two visions, so nobody really won. For those parties, it was also a policy success. The regionalist parties in Belgium initially had a federalist position, so it's a success. They had to redefine themselves, mostly towards more radical demands. It has led to tensions within those parties, but they managed to reinvent themselves and to appear as new again. NVA presents itself as a new party. DEFI, former FDF in Brussels, presents itself as a new party too. And the current institutional setting also makes it difficult to achieve independence, mainly because there's Brussels as a region, bilingual, that's located in Flanders, but that's mainly a multilingual city with a low proportion of Dutch-speaking citizens. All that makes it very difficult to strive for independence, and the regionalist parties have always or face difficulties with what to do with Brussels. Another and last unexpected consequence is that the German-speaking community today has, well, the fact that they've been granted more rights, it has generated more voice and so more demands. And so they're today also asking for more recognition as a region, and it's pushing for the regionalist model compared to the community model a little bit. So the German community wants more autonomy in terms of socioeconomic means. And so it has also led the NVA, the Flemish regionalists, to shift a little bit their discourse or way to advocate more autonomy from linguistic demands to more socioeconomic demands, to try to match that more regionalist direction in the debate in Belgium. Thank you very much.
Sorry, in the same way that I asked to Oscar, I want to ask you if do you think that I think that the fact of Quebec was French, okay? If you think that when you speak about minorities, okay, it's not like here. Okay, we have another language, another culture, or similar culture, but you have minorities with a strong nation state towards, okay? And do you think that it influences in the convivence now?
That's a very good question, because the question of majority and minority in Belgium is complicated. Initially, it was very simple. Flanders was considering itself as a periphery ruled by a central French-speaking elite. Problem is that economically, Flanders is now more prosperous than the rest of the country, but also with the federalization of the federal state now, if you look at its composition, is in majority composed of Flemish political actors. They have the majority in terms of, well, there's also parity at the federal level, but the point is there's been a shift in center-periphery relations, but I think you could say that in Flanders, it's a majority that still consider itself as a minority, and the other way around in French-speaking Belgium. So you have those difficulties in terms, and actually nobody's really the majority, because you have a parity at the federal level, you have a parity in Brussels, and it prevents also to have any group to feel itself strongly as a minority in a certain sense, because there's those protections at the federal level. So yeah, it's a complicated question, the question of majority and minority status. I don't think you said that the minority in Belgium has a strong nation state. I'm not really sure which minority you're referring to, even in that sense, because you're referring to Flanders.
The French minority
Mm-hmm.
in Belgium as a reference to France.
Yeah.
And the Italian minority
Oh.
in Switzerland is the Italian nation.
Yeah. There's really, if you look, there's, and I haven't talked about it, there's a small movement called Rassemblement Wallonie-France, which is a movement that wants to join the French-speaking Belgium to France, and that's really something that's not popular. It's less than 1% of the vote over the years. So there's culturally and linguistically some commonalities, but there's not really politically any strong links in terms of political cultures. There's huge differences, and so yeah. The minority doesn't look up to France as the solution. I think the French-speaking minority in Belgium doesn't really look up to France as a solution. In the same way as, well, some parts of Flanders look up to the Netherlands, but there's also a difficult relationship with the Netherlands in terms of potential ally through the commonalities of language. So yeah, there's neighbors that could be potential allies, but you do not see that built very strongly politically. If you look at the political parties that defend the French-speaking part of the population, and the successful ones, they do not advocate any link with France, for example. The one in Brussels, they advocate the protection of French language in and around Brussels, because Brussels is in Flanders, but they do not talk at all about relationship with France. Mm. Sorry.
How is the relationship between New Flemish Alliance and DEFI? Do they collaborate or are they opposite?
No. That's a very easy and simple question. No. They don't, and actually this is also, and less so. So because they were formerly part of electoral alliances, so NVA in Flanders was in cartel with the Christian Democrats, and DEFI, so FDF at the time, was in cartel with the Liberals. And at some points, first in 2007, but also in 2010, when parties were negotiating a state reform, well, the Liberals and the Christian Democrats, with their regionalist cartel partners, went to negotiate. And that's what led to the taking back of autonomy of the two regionalist parties, because they couldn't stand the compromise that was being agreed on at the federal level. And so the NVA quit the cartel with the Christian Democrats, and the same a little bit later for the Francophone regionalist party. So they really face difficulties when they have to compromise on those linguistic issues. So at the national level, it's very unlikely, and they've said it openly, that they will ever govern together. What will be trickier is Brussels in 2019. So we have regional elections where we also institutionally have protections of minorities. So you have a set of MPs in the Brussels government, parliament, that are elected for the Francophone group, and same for the Flemish-speaking group. There's a chance, and it's debated right now, that the NVA might have the majority in the Flemish group. But to form a government, you need a parity between the two groups in terms of ministers. So in that situation, you would have the French-speaking parties forced to govern with the NVA in Brussels, and DEFI is very strong in Brussels. It's the third party. So we'll see what they do. I really doubt that, well, I'm pretty sure they never will govern together in Brussels. But if you have that configuration of NVA first party in the Flemish group, DEFI very strong in the Francophone group, and they say, we do not want to govern together, we might face a blockade for the government formation in Brussels because of that.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Bom dia. Muy feliz de estar aquí. Thanks a lot for the invitation. Thanks a lot to you, Oscar. Since my English, my Castilian, and my Valencian are dramatically bad, I prefer speaking French. In French, I apologize. Le cas de la Corse est très peu étudié dans la littérature scientifique, et pourtant, je pense que les choses devraient évoluer parce qu'il est, de mon point de vue, particulièrement intéressant, au moins pour trois raisons. Pour trois raisons. D'abord parce que les nationalistes qui dirigent aujourd'hui la région constituent un cas qui est assez unique dans les démocraties. Une liste nationaliste a remporté plus de 56% des voix aux dernières élections régionales. Donc c'est un cas qu'on ne rencontre dans les démocraties occidentales qu'au Sud-Tyrol, au Pays Basque, au Groenland. Ces nationalistes, en grande partie, sont liés historiquement à des organisations clandestines violentes. Et enfin, ces nationalistes sont très récemment arrivés au pouvoir, ce qui limite évidemment leurs chances de réussite d'un point de vue du réformisme constitutionnel. Deuxième point, parce que l'ordre constitutionnel français, on ne le sait pas, est en fait beaucoup plus complexe qu'on ne le croit. En fait, il y a deux constitutions territoriales en France. Il y a une constitution métropolitaine qui est fondée sur un paradigme unitaire, une constitution pour les Outre-mer qui est fondée sur un paradigme de la différenciation, dont les effets sont très étonnants parfois, parce qu'il ne s'agit pas seulement de pouvoir adopter des lois régionales. En fait, certaines assemblées territoriales peuvent limiter des droits aussi fondamentaux que le droit au travail pour les citoyens français qui ne résident pas sur leur territoire depuis un certain nombre d'années. Ça signifie que ces principes unitaires français, en fait, ils sont totalement remis en question, totalement ignorés dans totalement contredits dans certains territoires d'outre-mer. La Corse, malgré son insularité, est considérée partie intégrante de la métropole. Évidemment, ça joue énormément dans la définition de son statut. Et enfin, les nationalistes, ils se confrontent à un État où, du moins en métropole, la tradition unitaire reste extrêmement puissante d'un point de vue idéologique, mais aussi du point de vue de l'opinion publique. Et d'ailleurs, dans le contexte actuel, les valeurs d'unité, de solidarité sont plus renforcées encore du fait de la crise économique et du fait de tensions culturelles qui traversent la société française, notamment vis-à-vis de l'intégration des musulmans. Alors, ces principes unitaires, ils concernent des dimensions très diverses, la dimension normative, bien sûr. Le peuple français est souverain et seuls ses représentants ou lui-même peuvent adopter ou adapter la loi. Certains territoires d'outre-mer peuvent adopter des actes matériellement législatifs, mais qui ne sont pas qualifiés de loi. La dimension fiscale, d'après la Constitution, seul le Parlement doit définir le régime de toutes les impositions. Alors, il existe des taxes locales, mais les régions ne peuvent pas les créer. Et de plus, elles n'ont quasiment aucune liberté dans la définition des taux. Et enfin, la dimension culturelle, selon la Constitution française, la langue de la République est le français. Il n'existe aucun droit à s'exprimer dans une autre langue vis-à-vis de l'administration. Évidemment, un système d'éducation bilingue pour tous est totalement impossible aussi. Alors, ces demandes nationalistes corses, évidemment, elles impliquent des exceptions à l'ordre constitutionnel unitaire. Et de ce point de vue, on ne peut pas s'étonner que le gouvernement français les rejette. Malgré tout, ce nationalisme corse, aujourd'hui, il s'appuie sur un soutien démocratique massif et le refus de rechercher un véritable accommodement implique des risques politiques importants, considérables. Alors, depuis 1958, cette Constitution française, elle a été révisée 24 fois. Mais ça ne veut pas dire que la procédure est facile à mettre en œuvre, loin de là. Non seulement les principes unitaires sont très puissants, quasiment impossibles à remettre en cause, mais la procédure elle-même est difficile à conduire, même si elle est peut-être moins difficile qu'en Espagne. Et les raisons de cette difficulté sont surtout politiques. Dans la première phase de la révision, les deux chambres du Parlement doivent voter le même texte séparément, dans les mêmes termes, ce qui fait que le Sénat a un pouvoir de blocage absolu. Et ce pouvoir de blocage absolu est d'autant plus problématique que le Sénat est toujours orienté à droite. Depuis 1958, il a été à droite 57 ans sur 60. Modifier les institutions de la fiscalité de la Corse n'implique pas, évidemment, toujours de réviser la Constitution. Et d'ailleurs, en Corse, le droit commun n'a jamais été totalement appliqué. Mais cependant, ces principes unitaires sont là aussi très, très puissants. Et le Conseil constitutionnel ne valide les dispositions spécifiques que s'il les estime justifiées par une différence de situation objective. Cependant, il a une vision très restrictive et ne précise jamais son raisonnement juridique. Regardez cet exemple, une décision de 2013 qui déclare inconstitutionnelle une disposition législative prorogeant un régime fiscal particulier pour la Corse. Cette prorogation a été soutenue par un rapport établi par une commission État-région qui démontrait la situation spécifique de l'île et qui établissait un retour progressif au droit commun. Vous voyez la décision, elle est ici intégrale, la décision. Elle ne mentionne ni les conclusions du rapport, ni la progressivité du dispositif. C'est inconstitutionnel, c'est contraire aux principes unitaires, point final. Et considérant cette défense des principes unitaires, on voit que le particularisme de la Corse ne peut être réellement développé sans réviser la Constitution. Mais c'est extrêmement compliqué politiquement. Alors, du Premier Empire jusqu'aux années 1970, l'appartenance de la Corse à la République française, enfin à la France plutôt, et l'application des principes unitaires n'a jamais été remis en cause de façon saillante. C'est étonnant pour un territoire qui a été indépendant, qui a été conquis par les armes, qui est isolé géographiquement, c'est une île, qui est dans une situation de grande pauvreté économique et sociale, qui est dans un état de profonde hétérogénéité culturelle. Au début des années 1900, encore 90% des enfants de Corse sont élevés en langue corse. Et cette situation change à partir des années 1960. Jusqu'à 2013, seuls les nationalistes ont revendiqué des réformes constitutionnelles pour la Corse. Évidemment, cela limitait les possibilités de concrétisation. Donc je vais présenter un petit peu plus longuement les origines et le développement de ce mouvement nationaliste. Un premier mouvement s'est structuré dans les années 1920-1930. Il était régionaliste, autonomiste, mais il ne s'agissait pas d'un parti politique. C'était un cercle intellectuel qui refusait de se présenter aux élections et qui, pire, dans les années 30, s'est de plus en plus, a de plus en plus repoussé la République française et a montré une sympathie de plus en plus claire pour l'Italie fasciste. Donc un second régionalisme apparaît dans les années 1960 à la faveur d'un processus de modernisation qui est lancé et mené par l'État central, par le gouvernement. Et ce processus, il génère des angoisses et des frustrations profondes. Au niveau économique, on a un programme étatique qui est fondé sur le développement de l'agriculture et du tourisme, qui parle explicitement, expressément de colonisation intérieure et qui accorde des avantages très importants aux rapatriés d'Afrique du Nord par rapport aux Corses, en termes de répartition des terres, en termes de prêts bancaires. Au niveau culturel, on a, dans les années 1950, une émigration très importante de 15% de la population environ, et une immigration très importante aussi d'Afrique du Nord. En parallèle, on a un développement touristique qui attire des milliers de nouveaux travailleurs. On a des groupes financiers extérieurs à la Corse qui prévoient des investissements de résidences de plusieurs dizaines de milliers de lits. Et tout ça, crée l'idée, favorise l'idée d'un danger fatal pour la langue, pour l'identité, pour la terre corse. Et enfin, au niveau politique, on a à cette époque une compétition extrêmement fermée, qui est écrasée par deux grands réseaux de notables qui s'appuient sur le clientélisme. C'est une situation qui est de plus en plus mal vécue à cette époque, des années 60, époque de croissance des valeurs post-matérialistes, de liberté. Et on a en plus un processus de modernisation qui est piloté de façon très centralisée, ce qui remet en question le véritable pouvoir des élus corses. Alors, cette contestation, d'abord régionaliste, elle se radicalise et se développe vraiment en 1973, quand l'État fait 3 graves erreurs concomitantes. L'État refuse l'ouverture d'une université en Corse, alors que sa loi semble le commander. Il refuse de considérer la langue corse comme une langue régionale de France, ce qui permettrait son enseignement facultatif, et il n'agit pas auprès de l'État italien afin de faire cesser une pollution marine massive due aux résidus d'une entreprise chimique italienne. Et c'est alors que ce mouvement régionaliste se rebaptise autonomiste, qu'on commence à parler de nationalisme et qu'on en abandonne aussi la voie électorale. On abandonne les élections qui sont jugées comme un moyen trop lent et qui sont jugées surtout trop corrompues par les fraudes et le clientélisme, ce qui veut dire que dans cette phase initiale, le nationalisme corse est bien un mouvement social de nature contestataire, pas un ensemble de partis politiques. Et de plus, enfin, à partir de 1973, on assiste à la structuration des organisations clandestines violentes, ce qui aura des conséquences énormes et qui pose avec davantage d'acuité la question des moyens mis en œuvre et des stratégies. Donc à la fin des années 60, au début des années 1970, on a 2 grandes sensibilités régionalistes. Une sensibilité de gauche, intellectuellement influente, mais socialement très peu présente. Les dirigeants résident à Paris, elle est absente des mobilisations sociales. Une sensibilité qui se dit apolitique, qui est fondée et menée par l'oncle et le père de l'actuel président nationaliste Gilles Simeoni, et qui est capable de réunir des foules importantes et de mener des actions contestataires très remarquées, des blocages de routes, des manifestations, des occupations, des grèves de la faim. Et face à ce durcissement de la contestation, le gouvernement français lance une première tentative d'accommodement en 1974. Et on a un chargé de mission gouvernementale qui doit notamment négocier un compromis avec l'organisation autonomiste des frères Simeoni. Mais ce chargé de mission ne peut rien négocier sur le plan politique et institutionnel. Il avoue même, dans une réunion publique, que si tous les Corses étaient autonomistes, la Constitution française ne changerait pas. Ça a généré, vous le comprenez, de fortes tensions internes au sein du nationalisme, qui s'est senti trompé. C'est alors qu'un choc moral ouvre une seconde phase de radicalisation. En août 1975, le leader autonomiste Edmond Simeoni conduit l'occupation d'une cave vinicole d'un rapatrié d'Afrique du Nord avec une douzaine d'hommes qui symboliquement portent des fusils de chasse. Il dénonce les fraudes, les compromissions de l'État et des banques, et il exige la redistribution des terres à des jeunes Corses. Et là, l'État répond de la plus mauvaise des manières, en envoyant peut-être 2000 policiers et gendarmes, des véhicules blindés légers, des automitrailleuses, des hélicoptères. L'assaut fait 2 morts chez les gendarmes, un blessé grave chez les autonomistes. 5 jours plus tard, le gouvernement dissout l'organisation des frères Simeoni et provoque une situation quasi insurrectionnelle à Bastia. On a un policier tué et 18 autres blessés par balle. Par balle. Donc à partir de là, vous avez une partie du mouvement, vous le comprenez, pour laquelle il n'y a plus rien à discuter avec l'État, que l'unique solution est obtenir l'indépendance par le biais de la violence armée. Par le biais de la violence armée, en mai 1976, ces militants créent le Front de libération nationale de la Corse, le FLNC, très critique envers le mouvement autonomiste légal et qui va modifier profondément le statut de la violence. Depuis le milieu des années 1960, la Corse connaissait des attentats explosifs, mais ils étaient très peu nombreux et visaient les injustices considérées les plus flagrantes. Avec le FLNC, la violence n'est plus un moyen subsidiaire, elle est le moyen central, indispensable du combat. Et à l'inverse, les moyens légaux et les élections sont rejetés ou dénigrés. Cependant, très important surtout aujourd'hui, le niveau de violence du FLNC n'a jamais été celui de l'IRA ou de l'État. Le FLNC n'a jamais posé de bombes dans les gares ou dans les supermarchés. Le FLNC est responsable d'environ 60 morts, dont un tiers sont des nationalistes tués par leurs propres bombes ou dans le cadre d'un affrontement fratricide. La stratégie la plus violente a été la campagne Les Français dehors, IFF, I Francesi Vor, des années 1980, qui a visé à intimider les personnes d'origine continentale afin de leur faire quitter l'île, mais sans volonté de tuer ou blesser. Malgré tout, ces années 1980 n'ont pas seulement été celles de, on dira, l'apogée de la violence. On a eu jusqu'à 800 attentats par an. Elles sont aussi marquées par la création de l'Assemblée de Corse en 1982, qui marque le retour des nationalistes dans la scène électorale. Et donc, même si les résultats ont été initialement très modestes, c'est le début d'un processus d'institutionnalisation qui a été difficile, mais qui a trouvé une assez incroyable concrétisation en 2017. Voilà ce que je voulais vous montrer avant. Pardon. Vous voyez la ligne rouge, c'est les résultats des nationalistes. Alors, dans la période initiale, les nationalistes étaient un mouvement marginal, vous le comprenez, marginal, sans aucune représentativité politique, et ils ont cherché d'un côté à créer des structures spécialisées dans tous les secteurs de la société et chercher des alliés politiques, notamment chez les outsiders. En ce qui concerne la diffusion sociale, le nationalisme a été très vite influent dans le champ du syndicalisme agricole et enseignant, a eu de très bonnes relations avec les syndicats de la gauche réformiste, mais de très mauvaises avec les syndicats de la gauche communiste. Et donc, le FLNC a imaginé une stratégie des contre-pouvoirs, qui a eu des impacts très importants. À partir de 1982, on voit apparaître dans tous les secteurs de la société des syndicats, des associations qui sont créés à l'initiative du FLNC et qui sont contrôlés plus ou moins directement par des membres de l'organisation clandestine jusqu'aux scissions du FLNC de 1989 et 1990. Par exemple, depuis 2002, le syndicat nationaliste, le syndicat des travailleurs corses, est le plus représentatif de Corse. En ce qui concerne la recherche d'alliés politiques, dans les années 70, face à un pouvoir de droite fermé, les nationalistes se sont souvent alliés aux partis socialistes et communistes pour dénoncer la répression de l'État, pour demander une régionalisation, pour demander l'enseignement de la langue corse. Mais leur vision était très différente, puisque seule la vision nationaliste impliquait une révision de la Constitution. Le durcissement dont j'ai parlé de l'action du FLNC a modifié la situation. C'est-à-dire que lors des premières élections régionales de 1982, les autonomistes modérés obtiennent un résultat intéressant de plus de 10%, et la gauche leur propose de participer à la majorité, ce qui suscite des tensions internes. Alors finalement, les autonomistes conditionnent leur acceptation à une dénonciation du clanisme et du clientélisme qu'un des partis de gauche ne peut pas accepter. En revanche, les radicaux refusent de participer aux élections, dénoncent la compromission des modérés et accentuent leur campagne d'attentat contre les continentaux, ce qui suscite des réactions de plus en plus fortes. Au bout de 3 ans, les deux tendances vont se réconcilier. En revanche, le nationalisme a été très affaibli dans les années 1980. Après la deuxième élection à la présidence de François Mitterrand, les clandestins décident d'une trêve de leurs actions violentes, ce qui permet un nouveau rapprochement avec les partis de gauche, d'autant que le gouvernement prépare un second statut pour la Corse, mais il n'est toujours pas question de réviser la Constitution. Jusqu'à la période actuelle, à une seule reprise, un gouvernement français a envisagé une révision constitutionnelle pour la Corse. C'était au milieu des années dans les années 1999-2002, le gouvernement de Lionel Jospin. Mais c'était une révision sous condition, qui n'a pas pu être menée à bien. C'était sous condition. Dans la première moitié des années 2000, le nationalisme corse est affaibli par ses échecs et par ses divisions internes. Sa progression commence en 2007. Elle est d'abord concrétisée lors des élections régionales de 2010, où il dépasse 35% des voix, améliore de 10% leurs meilleurs résultats. Et c'est alors que la majorité de gauche, la majorité régionale, fait le choix de chercher à s'approprier les thématiques nationalistes, d'autant plus que c'est une majorité relative qui a besoin de l'abstention d'au moins un groupe d'opposition pour adopter son budget. Et donc en 2013, l'Assemblée de Corse vote en faveur d'une révision constitutionnelle afin de pouvoir être habilité par le Parlement à adopter des dispositions législatives. Alors la délibération a été votée par 46 voix sur 51, mais l'ambition était très timide. Ce type de dispositif existe dans l'outre-mer depuis 2007, il ne donne aucun résultat. Malgré tout, les nationalistes n'étaient plus les seuls à demander une révision de la Constitution. Ils étaient malgré tout les seuls à demander un statut véritablement d'autonomie. En 2014, le FLNC a annoncé la fin de ses actions violentes. D'un point de vue électoral, ça a eu des effets énormes. D'un point de vue politique, ça n'a pas influencé le positionnement des autres partis. Le nationalisme compte sur lui-même, même si la situation évolue un petit peu. En 2018, le groupe favorable au président Macron à l'Assemblée de Corse a voté, comme les nationalistes, en faveur d'une habilitation permanente à fixer les règles dans le domaine de la loi, mais le président Macron lui-même n'accorde pas une grande importance à ce positionnement. Donc ça veut dire que ce mouvement nationaliste historiquement contestataire est devenu la seule force politique mainstream de l'île, avec un soutien électoral impressionnant, et pourtant, ses objectifs sont loin d'être satisfaits. Le 7 février 2018, le président Macron s'est dit favorable à l'inscription d'une mention de la Corse dans la Constitution, afin de l'ancrer dans la République, mais le gouvernement a validé un dispositif où l'Assemblée de Corse peut seulement demander, sur le fondement de ses spécificités, à être habilité par le Parlement, le gouvernement, à adapter des mesures normatives. Donc ce dispositif n'a rien d'une consécration pour les nationalistes, il est extrêmement éloigné de leurs demandes, et en plus le Sénat n'a pas encore voté cette disposition et pourrait très bien le refuser. Donc il peut sembler étonnant qu'un tel triomphe électoral soit si partiellement pris en considération. C'est un choix qui est risqué de mon point de vue. Et pourtant, c'est un choix qui est aussi rationnel de la part du président Macron. D'une part, satisfaire les nationalistes corses probablement aurait pour conséquence d'être refusé par le Sénat et d'être très impopulaire. Et d'autre part, ces nationalistes ont plusieurs grandes fragilités, ce qui a normalement incité le président Macron et son gouvernement à temporiser. Le succès nationaliste tient en grande partie à la très forte popularité d'un seul homme, c'est leur leader Gilles Simeoni. Les organisations nationalistes sont à la fois très puissantes par leur potentiel militant, mais aussi très faibles parce qu'elles dépendent totalement de leurs leaders, sont peu structurées au niveau local, sont peu capables de former de nouveaux cadres, sont peu capables de produire des programmes politiques. La capacité nationaliste à incarner le changement va logiquement baisser depuis qu'ils sont au pouvoir. Ça ne fait que 2 ans qu'ils sont au pouvoir. Leur rapide progression, plus de 20% de progression, est le fait d'électeurs aux sensibilités diverses qui seront d'autant plus difficiles à satisfaire. Et enfin, la compétition interne, la cooperative competition, reste très forte, d'autant qu'il y a un autre mouvement qui est en dehors de la majorité régionale, qui est plus radical. Et les annonces du gouvernement ont immédiatement suscité des appels à la radicalisation du discours et de l'action de la majorité régionale. Ça fait que le président Jules Siméon, président nationaliste, est aujourd'hui dans une situation très compliquée. Il est à la fois obligé de coopérer avec l'État, vis-à-vis duquel la dépendance financière est énorme pour mettre en œuvre les politiques régionales, et il est obligé de se confronter, au moins symboliquement, à l'État, sous peine de voir ses militants, ses sympathisants se radicaliser. Donc cette résistance du pouvoir central pose un très grave problème à la majorité nationaliste qui, semble-t-il, n'a conçu qu'une acceptation facile et rapide de ces demandes, malgré les difficultés objectives que celles-ci suscitaient. Ces contradictions internes permettent même d'imaginer la fin de l'Union qui a permis aux nationalistes d'arriver au pouvoir, ce qui renverrait les indépendantistes radicaux dans le camp de la contestation et accentuerait les risques pour la stabilité politique de l'île. En tout cas, pour moi, il ne fait guère de doute que le futur proche au niveau politique et institutionnel de la Corse va dépendre très fortement de la capacité des nationalistes à gérer ces contradictions internes. Merci beaucoup.
Okay. To what extent do you think that the Catalan case has had an influence on the way the French elites are viewing the Corsican strategy in terms of growing electoral success and demands for independence, things like that?
The opposition tried to use the Catalan case to create fear about nationalism, but it was a failure. It was a political failure. The opposition, all the oppositions are declining. Now nationalists with 56% of votes are quasi-hegemonic. But for nationalists, it was very important to say that Corsica is not Catalonia. 12% of Corsicans are pro-independence, about 12%.
Je ne comprends pas si la Corse a une force si grande, le nationaliste, et la République ne répond pas, alors quelle est la solution? Je ne vois une voie de solution dans cette situation.
C'est une situation politique extrêmement risquée. Situation politique extrêmement risquée et franchement, dès l'annonce du plan du gouvernement, très décevant pour les nationalistes, on a eu notamment parmi les jeunes, parmi les agriculteurs, parmi les franges de la société corse qui sont les plus radicales, des appels à boycotter par exemple les visites ministérielles. Par exemple, le président indépendantiste Jean-Guy Talamogne a préféré boycotter les visites ministérielles. Mais malgré tout, je le répète, d'un point de vue des policies, des politiques publiques, le président de l'exécutif du gouvernement, Gilles Simeone, est obligé de coopérer avec l'État. Sinon, il n'a pas de financement pour ces politiques. La dépendance de la Corse est terrible. La Catalogne, avec sa richesse économique, est dépendante de l'État espagnol. Imaginez la Corse.
Merci, une très intéressante présentation. D'après les données que vous avez données de votre explication, il paraît clair que l'effondrement de la gauche a permis ce remplacement de la force nationaliste par la gauche. Est-ce que le Front populaire a eu ou a quelques possibilités de trouver des soutiens, ou bien la droite est assez faible qu'il n'a pas de potentiel dans ce changement de parti, de système de parti qui paraît que les nationalistes, dont les nationalistes se bénéficient, c'est clairement.
Bien, je pense que là, il y a une question qui devient un petit peu anthropologique. C'est que, classiquement, le lien politique, le lien entre l'électeur et l'acteur politique en Corse est très personnifié, et que les intermédiaires électoraux, les brokers indispensables, étaient la famille et le maire du village. Pourquoi ? Parce que le maire du village a un rapport privilégié avec ses concitoyens. Ce sont les instruments privilégiés du choix électoral. Je pense que ces structures fondamentales du système politique corse se sont effondrées. Et sont aujourd'hui totalement submergées par l'organisation de masse nationaliste, qui peut s'appuyer sur 2000, 3000 militants et sympathisants mobilisés. La Corse a 300 000 habitants, c'est énorme. Peut s'appuyer sur une organisation de masse et sur les talents de leaders et de communicants de Gilles Simeoni. Gilles Simeoni est de très loin la personnalité politique préférée des Corses. Il y a même eu 40 points d'écart avec le second du classement en 2016. Donc, sauf à imaginer une érosion très rapide, veut dire un nouveau swing des nouveaux électeurs nationalistes, veut dire il est difficile de croire que les partis de droite et de gauche vont pouvoir contester facilement ce pouvoir nationaliste. Le grand risque pour le pouvoir nationaliste, il est interne, franchement.
Bonjour, merci de votre présentation. Je voudrais vous poser une question au sujet du référendum à la Nouvelle-Calédonie.
Oui.
Comment se peut-il que cette facile acceptation du référendum à la Nouvelle-Calédonie soit possible à la fois que par rapport à la Corse, on dit, bon, ça, c'est impossible. Même si, d'après la conception d'une nation française, typiquement française, la conception rhénane des nations, ancrée sur le fondement démocratique, des sujets tels que la race ou même l'éloignement géographique n'auraient pas lieu dans ces débats. Alors, comment se fait-il qu'on a une solution si différente dans ces deux cas ?
D'abord, il est plus facile de créer des situations d'exception à 20 000 km, à 24 heures d'avion qu'à 1 heure d'avion du continent. C'est quand même beaucoup plus facile de créer des situations particulières, même si il est vrai qu'elles sont très particulières. En ce qui concerne la Nouvelle-Calédonie, il faut quand même rappeler que dans les années 1980, on est proche d'une situation de guerre civile, avec des milices communautaires qui s'organisent. Et qui sont tout près de s'affronter, d'ailleurs qui parfois s'affrontent. Je veux dire, la solution trouvée en 1988 de reconnaître le droit à l'autodétermination de la Nouvelle-Calédonie était quelque part un choix assez logique. En ce qui concerne la Corse, je pense que les nationalistes ne sont au pouvoir que depuis 2 ans et que d'après le gouvernement, leur pouvoir est aujourd'hui fragile. C'est pour cela que l'on temporise. Je ne crois pas que l'on puisse temporiser très longtemps s'ils se maintiennent au-delà de 50% des voix. Ça, je ne pense pas que ce soit possible.
It's working? Yeah. So one aspect that hasn't come across in the presentations that much is the economic situation. So I was wondering, what is the role of the economic situation to enhance the claims for constitutional reform in the different countries analyzed?
It's a collective question, but I'll take a first shot. It's in the Belgian case. It's an important but not crucial aspect. It's an important aspect in the sense that, as I mentioned, the economic balance between the region has shifted. Initially, the center-periphery debate was linked to a more peripheral position of Flanders, also in economic terms. The interesting aspect is that as soon as it switched and the economic center of Flanders became the economic center, that's also when the voice of the Flemish regionalist parties became stronger. Another paradox is that those parties have mainly first campaigned around linguistic and cultural issues. And it's recently that the shift has been made towards more economic issues, and social issues, in the sense that it's a rich region that argues that they're paying for or subsidizing poor regions in the country. That is something that they would like to be stopped. So it's a country that has not faced as much the economic crisis as other countries in Europe, obviously, maybe because at the time it had no government. But it's also, an issue that has become more prominent in the recent years, especially in the case of the Flemish NVA, and who has reoriented its argument for more autonomy towards the other regions of the country. Thank you.
Within the UK, the economic argument hasn't been particularly important. Historically, for the SNP, obviously the issue of oil mattered, but it matters less now because it's seen as a weakness in that you have a declining resource and a volatile price, and so they try to counteract the claims that independence would create economic difficulties by trying to, with some success, I think, presenting the case that Scotland would not be poor as a result of independence. One of the most important aspects, though, on the economic side is within the context of the Brexit referendum, where the UK government's strategy in that referendum, which, remember, was a pro-Remain strategy, was to use the economy as an argument to undermine the Leave vote. So similar to the strategy they used in the independence referendum, so to talk up the economic disadvantages of a Leave vote. And what is striking in the analysis of public opinion and survey data on the vote is that did not resonate. If you were inclined to vote Leave, it didn't matter. And so it only mattered if you were already inclined to vote Remain anyway. But if you're driven by a desire for self-government, whether it's for Britain or for elsewhere, then almost the economic consequences that might emerge from that appear to be considered a price worth paying.
Yes, also in Switzerland, the economic issue is very crucial in the center-periphery cleavage. The southern part of Switzerland is one of the poorest regions of the country, and the crisis of the 90s and the 20s in terms of changing labor market rules, more free, because Switzerland is a U.S. country in terms of working labor market, because it's totally free to fire people as you want, and this is a crucial point. The free circulation of persons, the agreement with the European Union increased strongly, especially for low-educated people, competition in labor market, and the Lega dei Cinesi, also the Swiss People Party, are in this sector the most important supporter. That's a crucial point. This economic, of course, globalization creates winner and loser, and in this sense, center-periphery cleavages are connected with this one of the most important cleavage today. No.
No.
No. La meva pregunta és per a la professora McEwen. Jo he seguit amb una certa curiositat el treball que els grassroots movements han fet i l'enorme influència que han tingut en les seues comunitats. Jo crec que hi ha lliçons molt importants que potser puguem aprendre d'aquest moviment que ha significat una participació política des de la ciutadania, més o menys orquestada pel partit que li ha donat suport, però crec que és molt interessant que ens plantejar-se quina és la seva visió o si aquest moviment té possibilitats d'estendre's, perquè crec que és una fórmula de funcionament polític alternativa molt interessant. Gràcies.
You're right to say that it was directed. So the party and in particular the formal campaign for the yes vote created the conditions in which that movement would emerge, with the knowledge that they didn't then control it. So it has created some challenges for the SNP, where you have, particularly through the use of social media, some of the more, let's say, colourful characters within a pro-independence movement, perhaps potentially having some reputational damage for a more moderate pro-independence campaign. So it carries risks too, in that you create something that you can't then control, but you might still face the effects of it. I think Nicola Sturgeon, as First Minister, has been quite adept at managing that process, but I think it's definitely not without risk. It's quite a disparate movement in some senses. So there are, I suppose it's like there's this phrase in English about let 1,000 flowers bloom, and it hasn't gelled as a single coherent movement. So there will be internal tensions within there too. And it coalesced around the vote, the referendum itself, and will periodically coalesce around a moment like we saw last Saturday. But other than that, it's very fragmented. So I don't think it's there. For me, it's primarily there as a resource to mobilize should the SNP need it in the context of a further referendum. But I don't see it as emerging as an alternative to the dominant role played by the political parties.
We can extend the question to all the other members of the panel, because we live in an era where party groups' relationships is declining, and now with these regionalist movements, it's the contrary. It's the explosion of new groups, new social movements, somehow linked to the party, and how this helps the movement to bring forward their arguments. So feel free to join them.
Okay, well, in Belgium, the center-periphery question has been, of course, led on the Flemish side by the Flemish movement. There's no equivalent on the French-speaking side. The relationship with the regionalist parties is strong, although I didn't talk a lot about the Vlaams Belang, the radical right independentist party, but it has linked with the Flemish movement, so as the NVA. So there's two heads for one social movement. That's one problem. The NVA, because it's at the federal level in government, without discussing a lot of institutional issues, the link with the Flemish movement is difficult nowadays. So it's a party that walks a thin line. It's a thin line because it has enlarged its electorate towards groups that do not necessarily share the same goal in terms of institutional reform. So the NVA attracts former voters from the radical right party Vlaams Belang, but also more moderate voters who mainly wanted a right-wing government without the French-speaking socialists, to cut things short. And so it's a large house, and so it's a thin line to still satisfy the grassroots movement, who still strives for the same goal, independence, while not really making progress at the federal level, being in charge, not making progress. So that's one element that makes it difficult. The other, it's a movement that's not very vocal either. But that's in general in Belgium. When we had no government for a year and a half, I think we had 2 protests, 2 demonstrations. So it's not a very vocal civil society in general. So it goes through relationships at the top of the Flemish movement, the top of the parties. The parties have been, it's the same as the SNP, and VA has been very successful in attracting new members. The question is, who are these members, and do they have all the same goals? I don't think, well, the surveys show that it's not the case. They don't have the same goals. Same for the electorate. So that's the challenge, I think, for that party. It became the first party in Flanders and in Belgium by attracting former radical right voters and members, but also more center-right voters who do not necessarily share independence goals. And so I think that's going to be the main challenge for the next election for that party, to manage to satisfy all the sub-categories of voters and grassroots members. Yeah.
Corsican case, I think, is a very multidimensional question and difficult to answer. First of all, I speak about the division between moderates and radicals, because radicals was initially clandestine organizations, and the moderates were founded about grassroots organization, powerful grassroots organization, but oriented focused on a very strong, very charismatic leader, Edmond Simeoni, when Radicals was founded on clandestinity. So it was difficult, and the cooperative competition between these moderates, these radicals, these two sensibilities, these two main sensibilities in Corsican nationalism, was always decisive in the structuration of movement. And since 207, moderates are the dominant part. Since the end of the 80s, to the actual phase, radicals were dominant part. Second problem, I say that these nationalist organizations are electorally powerful. It's incredible the difference of situation between nationalist organizations and unionist ones in electoral terms, but organizationally they are weak. They are focused on their leader. They're unable to make current program manifestos. There is a complex situation, and there's a third dimension. Now we have in Corsica a strong difference between the grassroots nationalist activists and the nationalist electorate. The increasing nationalist vote make a difference, very huge difference between grassroots nationalist organizations and nationalist electorate. Excuse me for the English.
Switzerland has not really a strong mass party legacy, because of the long stability of the party system. So that's very different than the main democratic regime in Europe. And this is the reason, because the mobilization of nationalists and populists in the 90s and 20s has been able to challenge the system, because the Haute parties are really very institutional, very government-oriented. They mobilize weekly, very weak in the campaign, electoral campaign. They have all the electorate, but all is changing from since the 90s. The Lega dei Ticinesi is a bit particular, because it's not a member party. It's not members. So it's mobilized a lot in the media. Of course, it's a small region, but which is very important is the concentration of media, official media, newspapers, TV, public broadcast, and so on. And this party, because of this strong polemic discourse language, has been able to mobilize also the media system, and they create mobilization through political communication a lot. Of course, there is grassroots mobilization, but it's not the crucial element. The crucial element is the conquest. It was the conquest of political communication, also because, as I said before, the difficulties of the old parties to mobilize in this specific new arena, and also social web and so on in the recent time.